policy actions on demand in the most interest-sensitive sectors of the economy. It will take time, however, for the full effects of monetary restraint to be realized.
Welcome to
especially on
Financial
inflation.
Stockholm. I'm Christopher Crystal. Today is Tuesday, March 7th, 2023, and we'll be getting comments from the Fed a little bit later today, and we'll get to hear what his thoughts are and inflation and rate hikes. And so that's one of the focuses for the Swedish Press, and we're also focused on what we'll get from our RiksBank's head, Thedéen. And because he gave comments this morning about inflation and about how high it was. And so this has triggered a fear of more rate hikes. And this is joined by, the fear of what the ECB is going to do. And Sweden will be kind of marching in lockstep. We cannot be seen to be doing too little. We need to have enough. And the real fear is right now that possibly our Fed head or RiksBank's head will hike rates a little bit too fast. So one of the people out there saying this is Annika Winsth over at Nordea. She's their chief economist, and she's been very good on the previous RiksBank's head, and Stefan Ingves. She was able to really, very accurately predict what he was doing. And I don't think she has a feel for Thedéen at this point. He's still too new, and he's not so Keynesian. He's talking about hiking the rates, and I think this is necessary. And I think we're in a scenario where he has to act like Paul Volcker. Many people thought that he would choke off the economy, and I'm talking about Paul Volcker, and he had to do this for Nixon, and it was a very tough time in America. And then we got hit with the oil embargo and so forth, and we had a lot of economic issues, and you had the days of the Nifty 50. So I think this is what people are afraid of. So we have people talking about rate hikes bringing us up to 6% here in Sweden for the household, and we're already at the lowest rated economy in Europe, and that's because of the household indebtedness and Swedish mortgage rates and so forth. And then, but Annika also thinks that the Fed will be at 6% in the U.S. And both of these targets are targets that I've discussed in the past. And I think 6% certainly for the U.S. You may even see higher. And I certainly think you could see 6% here in Europe. And I think the ECB and Sweden Riksbank have been too slow to raise rates. They could have been doing this gradually, but instead they've been waiting too long, and so now we have to pay the piper, so to speak. So on top of that, we have the Swedish society and what's going on here. We've had a number of shootings in our capital city, just outside of the capital city. And this is on Friday we had these children shooting at each other, and we had the poor girl being stabbed in Gothenburg by a man who was 36 years old. I thought he was 38. So we're really coming into the question of what's happening here in Sweden. And for the majority of Swedish inhabitants, this is a change in lifestyle from the last 20, 30, 40 years or longer. And so you have and I think really what this is as you have a constant rate of violence, and the violence seems to be escalating. We have everything from fistfights to knives, you have guns, you have explosions. You're really looking at a changing landscape where people are trying to adjust and understand what's happening. And that's all at the same time that you have this changing culture in terms of, what is a man, or what are a man's responsibilities? What is a woman? What are a woman's responsibilities? What are the children, and how are they to be handled and treated? And so it's really created a lot of confusion for people. And so this constant violence is really unsettling for a lot of people. And this is from a society that was very nonviolent in the past and always neutral. Remember, Sweden did not participate in World War II. They were quote unquote neutral. You did have the sealed trains, but you also had the rescue of children who were Jewish by Raoul Wallenberg. So you had a lot of differences going on, but you had a nonviolent society where even if you made a threat against somebody, you could wind up in court and get some jail time. So today, when you're seeing that made up words are being judged as made up and we can't interpret it in an effort to not give out a ruling, it really creates a lot of confusion for what's going on. So that's where we are. And then we have the political parties, which are really fighting with each other after the election. One that's lost after 8 years and is now blaming all the problems in Sweden with the economy on the current government. The current government correctly pointing out, well, hey, we just got here, so these problems are not really ours. But we're moving into really kind of like a full-fledged propaganda war with each other. You have this Swedish politician. She's a social democrat. She tweeted out last night, Sweden's one of the best countries to live in, and I would have to agree. I think Sweden is. But then you also have the right-leaning party tweeting out, what is she talking about and so forth. And hey, she made the tweet at 1:30 in the morning, so maybe the bottle was empty. So you have a lot going on in terms of the politics and what's happening. You have surveys coming out where you see that the lack of satisfaction with the current government is very, it's very high in terms of lack of satisfaction or low confidence. Now, so the question is, would you get to a no confidence vote, which you had with the Swedish system in the past? We had the Social Democrats, where Stefan Löfven was the prime minister, and then he was voted out, not once but twice, and he stuck around the first time. And then he finally turned it over to Magdalena Andersson, and she continued to run the country, and then we are where we are. But in order to get that same scenario, the parliament right now is split 176, 173. So you would need 3 people who would be in the Moderaterna or the Liberal or the Christian Democrat to vote against their party and go and join the Social Democrat. And I don't think you'll see that. It does not look like we'll see what you saw with the Center Party in the last time with Annie Lööf, who was the leader of the party, who voted to go with the Social Democrats in their no confidence, in the hopes that she would become the prime minister. So that didn't happen, and nor do I think you'll have a no confidence vote because of the tightness of the party seats in the parliament. Something that's pointed out by our Statistics Bureau is that the amount of women in politics or elected is less than the amount of men, and you really these stories have, they just pop up, and it's kind of funny because if this is what people have voted for, this is what people have voted for. But if you're looking for some sort of alternative reason to say like, hey, this isn't equal, I guess you'll find it. But this really shows you where our economy is. People are looking for stories that don't mean anything, don't have any real relevance, to take away from the current situation of the households. And they're being hardly pressed or pressed hard on food price, energy price, and now interest rates. So we'll continue to see what happens here. And we really need to see more energy creation here in Sweden. So there's a discussion about a wind park in the sea in the southern part of Sweden, and whether it'll be off the coast of Denmark or where it'll be. And so what does this mean for stocks? Would it be Siemens? Would it be Gamesa? Would it be Vestas Wind? We're not sure yet, but there is a debate, and it is building about where to build. And personally, I'd like to see more nuclear, and I'd like to see it done at an accelerated rate, like it was done in Austria 60 years ago. And in 3 years, we need this power. We need to, if we're going to have a stable economy, we need stable and reliable, cheap energy. So we'll see what happens there. But Germany over this past year has spent, I think it's $1 trillion on coal. And had they spent this money on nuclear reactors instead, we would have had enough to have energy power for 10 years or 20 years. Really would not be an issue. So when you have a government that sits there and says they want to lower emissions and they want to save the planet, and then they're doing exactly the opposite, you really have to start to wonder, what are they really trying to achieve, and what are their real goals? And I think that's what's waking up in Europe right now. We've seen, not this weekend, but the weekend before, we had protests in Germany, people marching and saying, hey, we don't want the war in Ukraine, and people also talking about, green energy and so forth. So it's really, we're not at a point of conflict or breakdown of government in Europe, but it is getting increasingly confusing when the governments are doing things opposite of what their parties are, or what they're elected for. And so the war in Ukraine looks like it's stepping up. Russia's been flying bombers. Some of them are loaded up with missiles. The Ukraine is been getting missile systems, Patriots, and they're requesting new bomb systems like the Mk-20s. They're also requesting other systems that will give them a 72-kilometer range. You're looking at a lot of casualties in this. Bakhmut looks like it's been taken by the Russians, and that was by the Wagner Group. So when you read about the casualties in Russia, those are probably attributed to the Wagner Group in Bakhmut. I'm not an expert on where the regional fighting is and where the casualties are piling up, but I would anticipate it's from there. And this would be the Wagner Group that recruited 40,000 out of the prisons. So I don't think they really care that they're losing these people. 500 a day was one time reported, in Bakhmut, because these are people where they told them if you make it through by this date, you get citizenship back to you, or you're allowed to re-enter society. That's what Wagner Group was telling these people. So I don't think they're too concerned about the loss ratio. But the Mk-20 bomb, which has something like 200 dispersible explosive devices inside of this 1,000-kilogram bomb, would certainly be used against infantry, and probably see more casualties coming out of the Wagner Group. There are no signs yet of whether China has supplied weaponry to Russia for the war. But China is making comments about strengthening the relationship with Russia, and I think that's something, especially when we're looking at inflation, that we need to pay real attention to, is the relationship between China and Russia. Certainly, as that relationship strengthens, the idea that there would be a war over Taiwan is not going to happen. I think it would be an economic merger, so to speak, where Taiwan would be invited economically into the group or into China, and I think that would be something more like what's going to happen. And on a side note, and maybe a little bit lighter tone, the Swedish Press has an article talking about Jeff Bezos' super yacht, which he had built in Holland, and they're saying it's near completion. And so I don't know if there's another news block going out, or the New York Post is banned from being read by the Swedish authors or reporters. But the yacht that they were talking about in the Swedish Press was actually sighted in the North Sea, and that was in an article in the New York Post the other day. So so we'll see. But we're really kind of, I think that story kind of highlights where we are. It's hard to say what's true. It's hard to say what's just propaganda. But we're certainly in a tough position. We're certainly looking at a scenario where we're going to see rates going up, and this looks to be global through the Western economies. So we've created our inflation problem. We have individuals that supposedly understand inflation, failed to act, and are now going to be forced to act. So we'll see what happens. Remember, you can always make money in the market, whether you're long or short, whether you have a short-term strategy or a long-term strategy. You can always make money. We'll have the links for our Substack, and you can always subscribe, through the description and the links and so forth. So I want to wish you luck and happy hunting in the market. Thank you very much.